Sarah, we've decided to go with someone else for the wedding, Marcus said over the phone, his voice casual as if he was canceling a dentist appointment rather than destroying 6 months of my life's work. I sat in my home office, surrounded by fabric samples, vendor contracts, and detailed timeline spreadsheets for what was supposed to be the wedding of the century. The Henderson Morrison wedding. A $300,000 extravaganza that would have launched my small wedding planning business into the luxury market. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed, though I'd heard him perfectly. "Yeah, Madison found this amazing planner in New York. Really high-end stuff. You understand?" Madison, his 24-year-old fiancé who treated me like hired help from day one, despite the fact that I'd bent over backward to accommodate every ridiculous whim she'd dreamed up. "Marcus, the wedding is in 3 weeks. I've already coordinated with 30 vendors, booked the venue, arranged." "About that," he interrupted, "Madison's planner says we won't need to pay you since you didn't complete the job. Breach of contract or whatever." My blood ran cold. Breach of contract? I fulfilled every obligation. You're the ones breaking the contract. "Look, Sarah, I don't want to get into legal stuff. It's just business, you know." Just business. 6 months of 12-hour days, countless late-night calls, and my entire reputation riding on this wedding. Just business. My name is Sarah Chen, and at 34, I've spent the last 8 years building enchanted events from nothing. After my divorce left me with barely enough money to rent a tiny office space, I'd worked tirelessly to establish myself in Seattle's competitive wedding industry. The Henderson Morrison wedding was supposed to be my breakthrough moment, the client that would prove I belonged in the luxury market. Instead, it was about to destroy me. "The deposit," I started. "Non-refundable deposits are for completed services," Marcus said, his tone shifting to something colder. Madison's planner explained it all, pretty standard stuff. I gripped the phone tighter. The $15,000 deposit wasn't just money. It was my rent for the next 3 months, my daughter Emma's dance classes, our grocery budget. I'd already paid deposits to vendors using my personal credit cards, trusting that the final payment would cover everything. "I'll call you back," I said, hanging up before he could respond. I stared at the detailed timeline I'd created for their perfect day. Every moment choreographed, every detail planned with military precision. The imported Italian flowers that Madison had insisted on, the custom lighting installation, the 7-course tasting menu that had taken 4 meetings to finalize, all of it gone. But as I sat there, something shifted. The initial shock gave way to a familiar feeling, the same cold calculation that had gotten me through my divorce, through single motherhood, through building a business from scratch. Marcus and Madison thought they could just walk away. They had no idea what they'd unleashed. I picked up my phone and called my best friend and business partner, Jessica. "They fired me," I said without preamble when she answered. "What? But the wedding is 3 weeks away. And they're claiming I breached contract, so they don't have to pay me." Jessica let out a string of expletives that would have made my ex-husband blush. "Can they do that?" "They think they can." I was already opening my laptop, pulling up files. "Jess, I need you to come over. Bring wine. We have work to do." While I waited for Jessica, I did what I always do when I'm angry. I organized. I pulled every contract, every email, every text message related to the Henderson Morrison wedding. By the time Jessica arrived with a bottle of Pinot Grigio and Thai takeout, I had everything arranged chronologically. "Okay, walk me through this," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I started from the beginning. How Marcus Henderson, heir to a commercial real estate fortune, had contacted me 8 months ago. How he'd been engaged to a different woman then, someone age-appropriate who'd apparently been too boring for his tastes. How he'd met Madison at a charity gala and broken off his first engagement within a week. "Red flag number 1, Jessica muttered, pouring wine. "Oh, it gets better," I continued. Madison Morrison, social media influencer with 2 million followers and the emotional maturity of a teenager. She wanted the most expensive everything, then changed her mind constantly. I've been through 6 different color schemes, 4 venue changes, and 12 different dress options. I showed Jessica the contracts, all properly executed, all clearly stating that deposits were non-refundable regardless of completion status. The payment schedule we'd agreed to, the email trail showing I'd fulfilled every requirement. They don't have a legal leg to stand on, Jessica observed. No, but they have money for lawyers and I don't. They're counting on me being too small to fight back. Jessica leaned back in her chair, studying me. I know that look. You're planning something. I was. The idea had been forming since Marcus hung up on me, crystallizing as I reviewed our correspondence. They thought they were dealing with a desperate small business owner who would quietly accept being cheated. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who'd spent years learning to be strategic, patient, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. Tell me about this New York planner, I said, opening my laptop. Vivian Ashworth, Jessica read from her phone. Apparently she's done weddings for celebrities, charges ridiculous amounts, very exclusive. I pulled up Vivian's website, sleek, expensive, impressive. Then I dug deeper, checking vendor reviews, industry forums, social media. What I found was interesting. Look at this, I said, turning the laptop toward Jessica. 3 complaints in the past year about vendor payments being delayed. 2 lawsuits from florists who didn't get paid. And look at her recent clients, all the weddings look identical. Same style, same vendors, same everything. Cookie-cutter luxury, Jessica observed. Exactly. She's not a planner, she's a brand. Madison probably saw her Instagram and fell in love with the aesthetic. I kept digging, cross-referencing vendor lists, checking permits and licenses. Vivian Ashworth operated like a machine, high volume, maximum profit, minimal customization. The opposite of everything I prided myself on. Sarah, Jessica said slowly, what are you thinking? I closed the laptop and looked at her. I'm thinking Marcus and Madison want the perfect wedding, and I'm the only person who knows exactly how to give it to them. The next morning, I started making calls. First to my lawyer, confirming what I already knew. The contract was ironclad. Marcus would have to pay me eventually, though it might take months of legal battles I couldn't afford. Then I called something else entirely. Henderson Residence, answered a crisp voice I recognized as Marcus's assistant. This is Sarah Chen from Enchanted Events. I have some final details to discuss regarding the wedding cancellation. Oh yes, Mr. Henderson mentioned you might call. I can arrange payment for any outstanding vendor cancellation fees. Actually, I wanted to offer my assistance with the transition to the new planner. Professional courtesy. There was a pause. That's very generous of you. I've worked with most of the vendors they'll be using. It might help avoid any last-minute complications. Another pause. I'll pass along your offer. I hung up and smiled. Phase 1. Establish myself as helpful and cooperative. Phase 2 would be more interesting. Over the next 3 days, I made myself invaluable to the transition. I provided vendor contact information, shared timeline templates, even offered to personally introduce Vivian to key suppliers. I was professional, gracious, and completely transparent about wanting to ensure the wedding went smoothly. What I didn't mention was that I knew every vendor personally. I'd worked with them for years, built relationships, earned their trust and loyalty. And wedding vendors in Seattle talked to each other constantly. Sarah called Tony from Bella Vista Flowers as I walked into his shop Thursday morning. I heard about the Henderson wedding. I'm so sorry. I shrugged, projecting resigned acceptance. These things happen. I just want to make sure the transition goes smoothly for everyone. This New York planner, Tony said, shaking his head. She called yesterday demanding we match prices from some vendor in Manhattan. When I explained our costs are different here, she hung up on me. I'm sure she's just used to different markets, I said diplomatically, though I filed the information away. Maybe, but she's already changed the flower order 3 times. First it was white roses, then pink peonies. Now she wants some exotic orchid that doesn't even bloom in March. I made sympathetic noises, while mentally noting each detail. By the time I left Tony's shop, I had a complete picture of Vivian's approach, demanding, inflexible, and completely unfamiliar with local resources. The pattern repeated itself throughout the week. The caterer complained about unrealistic menu demands. The photographer was frustrated by timeline changes. The venue coordinator was pulling her hair out over conflicting setup instructions. But I didn't just collect information, I provided solutions. Small ones, seemingly innocent suggestions that helped vendors navigate Vivian's difficult demands. I was everyone's favorite person, the local expert who understood both the vendors and the challenging client situation. By Friday, I had a complete picture of Vivian's plans for the Henderson-Morrison wedding. And I had something else, the trust and cooperation of every single vendor involved. Jessica met me for dinner that evening at our usual wine bar. "You look like the cat that ate the canary," she observed as I slid into our booth. "Do I?" I signaled the waiter for our usual bottle. "I've just been helping with the transition, making sure everyone's prepared for the big day." "Uh-huh, and what exactly are you preparing?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the notes I'd been taking. Vendor complaints, timeline conflicts, design inconsistencies, a dozen small problems that individually seemed manageable but collectively spelled disaster. "Vivian's trying to plan a New York wedding in Seattle," I explained. "She doesn't understand the local market, the vendor relationships, the logistics. She's treating it like she can just impose her standard template." "So what happens when it all falls apart?" "Well," I said, accepting our wine with a smile, "that would be unfortunate. Especially since it's too late to fix any major problems now." Jessica stared at me. "Sarah, you're not actually going to sabotage their wedding." "Sabotage?" I looked genuinely hurt. "I would never, I'm just not going to prevent the natural consequences of poor planning." The difference was crucial. I wasn't going to actively destroy anything. I was simply going to stop being the safety net that had been holding everything together. The calls started the following Monday, exactly 2 weeks before the wedding. First, it was the florist. "Sarah, I know you're not handling the Henderson wedding anymore, but I'm desperate." This Vivian woman ordered flowers that don't exist in March, then screamed at me when I suggested alternatives. Now she wants me to fly in orchids from Hawaii at triple the original budget. The family approved the extra cost, but I can't guarantee delivery timing with such short notice. I made sympathetic sounds while taking notes. "That sounds incredibly stressful, Tony. The thing is, you originally suggested a beautiful mix of seasonal flowers that would have been perfect. Is there any way you could call her? Maybe explain the local market?" "I'm afraid that would be inappropriate," I said regretfully. "Professional boundaries, you know." Next came the caterer. "Sarah, I need your help. This New York planner wants to completely change the menu with 10 days' notice. She's demanding dishes that require ingredients I can't source locally. When I told her it wasn't possible, she threatened to find another caterer." 2 weeks before the wedding?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Exactly. And she'd have to bring someone in from out of state, which would cost a fortune and require permits we don't have time to get." I listened patiently as he detailed the impossible demands, the unrealistic timeline, the complete disconnect between expectation and reality. "I wish I could help," I said finally, "but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to interfere with another planner's event." By Wednesday, my phone was ringing constantly. The photographer couldn't make sense of the timeline Vivian had created. She'd scheduled formal photos during the cocktail hour and reception shots before the ceremony. The band had questions about setup logistics that Vivian couldn't answer. The venue coordinator was drowning in conflicting instructions and last-minute changes. Each caller got the same response: sympathy, understanding, and absolute refusal to step in and fix the mounting problems. Because here's what Marcus and Madison didn't understand about the wedding industry: it's built on relationships. Vendors work together constantly, sharing resources and expertise. When a wedding planner comes in from outside and treats local professionals like disposable contractors, those relationships become strained. And when the original planner, the one who built those relationships over years of mutual respect and collaboration, steps back, the entire support system collapses. By Thursday, 1 week before the wedding, the situation had reached crisis levels. Jessica and I were having lunch when my phone buzzed with a text from Madison herself. "We need to talk. Emergency." I showed the message to Jessica, who nearly choked on her salad. She's actually reaching out to you. Apparently, Vivian isn't quite the miracle worker they expected. I waited 2 hours before responding, just long enough to seem appropriately busy, but not vindictive. I'm available this afternoon if it's urgent. We met at an upscale coffee shop in Bellevue, Madison's preferred territory. She arrived 20 minutes late, looking frazzled in a way that was completely at odds with her usual Instagram-perfect appearance. "Sarah, thank God you agreed to meet," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I know things ended badly between us, but I need your help." I remained silent, waiting for her to explain. "Vivian is," Madison struggled for words. "She's not what we expected. Everything's falling apart, and the wedding is in 6 days." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "What specifically is the problem?" The floodgates opened. Madison detailed a week of miscommunications, vendor conflicts, and mounting costs. Vivian had promised the world but failed to deliver on basic logistics. The flowers were wrong, the food was impossible, the timeline made no sense. "Marcus is furious," Madison continued. "His mother is threatening to boycott the wedding if we can't get it together, and my followers are expecting this perfect fairy tale event that we've been promoting for months." Ah yes, the social media angle. Madison had been posting about her dream wedding for months, building anticipation among her 2 million followers. The pressure to deliver perfection wasn't just personal, it was professional. "What are you asking me to do?" I said carefully. Could you maybe work with Vivian, just to help coordinate with the local vendors? You know everyone and they respect you." I pretended to consider this. "Madison, I appreciate you reaching out, but working with another planner on their event creates liability issues. Insurance, contracts, professional standards, it's complicated. What if we paid you as a consultant?" "It's not about money," I lied smoothly. "It's about professional ethics. I can't step into the middle of someone else's project." Madison's face fell. "So there's nothing you can do." I leaned forward, projecting sympathy. "The only way I could ethically help would be if you terminated your contract with Vivian and rehired me as the primary planner." "But the wedding is in 6 days." "I know. It would be challenging." Madison stared at me, and I could see the wheels turning. She was trapped between an incompetent planner and an impossible timeline, with her reputation and relationship on the line. "How much would it cost?" she asked finally. I quoted my standard emergency planning fee, triple the normal rate for events with less than 2 weeks' notice, plus the original contract amount, since they'd never actually paid me for the 6 months of work I'd already completed. "That's almost double what we paid Vivian." "Emergency planning is expensive," I said calmly. "And given the short timeline and existing complications, I'd need to bring in additional staff, pay rush fees to vendors, work around existing commitments." I let the implications hang in the air. Madison could pay my premium rates for a wedding that might be salvageable, or she could stick with Vivian and face disaster in front of 2 million followers and Seattle's social elite. "I need to talk to Marcus," she said finally. "Of course, but Madison," I looked at her directly, "if you decide to make a change, it needs to happen today. Tomorrow is too late to fix some of these issues." She nodded and rushed out, leaving me alone with my coffee and a growing sense of satisfaction. The call came at 6 p.m. "We want to hire you back," Marcus said without preamble. "What do we need to do?" "First, you need to terminate your contract with Vivian. Then we execute a new contract with my emergency planning terms. Finally, you pay the original contract amount plus the emergency planning fee up front." "Up front?" "Marcus, you stiffed me once. I'm not taking that risk again." There was a long pause. "How do we know you can actually fix this?" "You don't," I said calmly. "But I'm your only option. Every other qualified planner in Seattle is already booked for next weekend, and you've burned through your timeline for bringing someone in from out of state." Another pause. "Fine, what do you need from us?" By 10 p.m. that night, I had signed contracts and a bank transfer confirmation for $47,000. The original contract amount plus my emergency fee. Vivian had been fired via a very awkward conference call, and I was officially back as the Henderson Morrison wedding planner, with 5 days to pull off a miracle. Jessica came over at midnight with coffee and energy drinks. "Are you insane?" she asked, surveying the disaster I'd inherited. "How are you going to fix this?" I smiled, spreading out the vendor contracts and timeline spreadsheets. "I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to replace it." Here's what Madison and Marcus didn't realize. While they'd been struggling with Vivian's impossible demands, I'd been preparing for exactly this scenario. Every vendor problem I'd learned about, every timeline conflict I'd documented, had been filed away as part of a comprehensive backup plan, because I'd known this moment would come. Not hoped, known. "The orchids from Hawaii?" I called Tony at home. "Forget them. We're going with the original seasonal arrangement I suggested months ago. I have a confirmed delivery for Friday afternoon." "The impossible menu," I texted the caterer. Back to our original 7-course plan. I kept all the prep schedules and ingredient orders on hold. The timeline confusion. I revised everything back to the meticulously planned schedule I'd created originally, the one that accounted for every local variable and vendor requirement. One by one, I dismantled Vivian's chaos and rebuilt the wedding I'd been planning all along. The only difference was that now I was charging emergency rates and had complete creative control. By Friday morning, 16 hours before the ceremony, everything was back on track. The vendors were relieved and cooperative, having dealt with me for years and trusting my judgment completely. The venue looked exactly as I'd originally envisioned. The timeline flowed seamlessly from ceremony to reception. Madison called me that afternoon, her voice tearful with gratitude. "Sarah, I can't believe you pulled this off. Everything looks perfect." "It should," I said, putting the finishing touches on the centerpieces. "It's exactly what I planned 8 months ago." The wedding itself was flawless. Every detail executed perfectly, every moment flowing seamlessly into the next. Madison's social media followers were treated to the fairy tale event they'd been promised, and Marcus's family was appropriately impressed by the luxury and sophistication. As I watched the happy couple share their first dance, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not just because I'd saved the wedding, but because I'd proven something important to myself and everyone else in the industry. You don't mess with someone who spent 8 years building relationships, learning the business, and earning respect through consistent excellence. You certainly don't think you can cheat them and walk away without consequences. The revenge wasn't in sabotaging their wedding. It was in making them pay triple rates for the same event I would have delivered perfectly for half the price. It was in showing them that my expertise wasn't replaceable, my relationships weren't transferable, and my professional value was non-negotiable. Marcus found me during the reception, looking slightly sheepish. "Sarah, I owe you an apology, and probably a lot more than that." "You don't owe me anything, Marcus. You paid for services rendered. We should have stuck with you from the beginning." I smiled, watching Madison pose for photos with her perfectly arranged flowers, the same seasonal blooms I'd originally suggested. "Yes, you should have." Jessica appeared at my elbow with a glass of champagne. "So," she said quietly, "was this worth it?" I considered the question. The past week had been exhausting, stressful, and professionally risky. But looking around at the perfectly executed wedding, at the relieved vendors who'd learned they could trust me to solve impossible problems, at the social media buzz already building around the event. "Ask me next month when the referrals start coming in," I said, clinking my glass against hers, because that was the real victory. Not just the money, though the emergency fee would keep my business afloat for months. Not just the satisfaction of proving my worth, though that felt pretty good too. The real victory was the message I'd sent to every potential client, every vendor, every competitor in Seattle's wedding industry. Sarah Chen delivers results, no matter what. She's the planner you want when everything goes wrong. She's the professional who can save your most important day. By Monday morning, I had 3 new client inquiries and 2 vendor partnership offers. By the end of the week, I was booked solid through the following year, with a waiting list that included some of the city's most prominent families. Marcus and Madison had wanted to trade me in for someone more impressive, more expensive, more prestigious. Instead, they'd given me the most effective marketing campaign of my career and paid premium rates for the privilege. The Henderson Morrison wedding became legendary in Seattle wedding circles, not just for its beauty, but for the story behind it. The planner, who was fired 3 weeks before the event, then brought back to save the day at triple rates. The cautionary tale about the importance of respecting local expertise and honoring professional relationships. 6 months later, I moved Enchanted Events into a beautiful new office space in downtown Seattle, with room for the 3 additional planners I'd hired to handle our expanded client base. The walls were decorated with photos from our most successful events, including several shots from the Henderson Morrison wedding. Madison still followed me on social media, occasionally commenting on my posts with enthusiastic praise for my work. Marcus sent a referral my way when his business partner got engaged. And whenever potential clients asked about my experience with difficult situations or impossible timelines, I simply smiled and told them about the time I planned a perfect wedding with 5 days' notice. I never mentioned the other part of the story: the months of preparation, the strategic positioning, the careful orchestration of events that led to that emergency contract. That was my secret, the professional magician's trick that no one needed to see behind the curtain. Because the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's making them pay you handsomely for the privilege of learning exactly how wrong they were. And every time I signed a new contract, every time a vendor told me how much they appreciated working with a true professional, every time I looked at my bank account balance, I remembered Marcus's casual dismissal. "It's just business, you know." He was right, it was just business. My business. And business was very, very good.